Good evening, everyone. It's Denise from Dobby Books. I'm so glad I got a chance to hang out with you again tonight. It's almost 9 o'clock here in Southern California, but I have some free time. I'm not too tired tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and just share with you a reading update. So, first, I just want to show you what I have finished. I did finish Billy Budd. And what was interesting is it kept reminding me of this old black and white movie I saw. It was British. And I don't even know how long ago I saw it. But as I'm reading more and more into the story, I'm thinking, boy, this kind of looks like that old movie I saw long ago. And it was exactly that. I didn't see the movie from the beginning. I never learned what the title was, but I did see it through to the end. And I thought to myself, what a tragic story. That's exactly what Billy Budd is. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. You could pretty much guess if I'm calling it a tragic story. It's not the most happy of endings, but there's basically this beautiful young man in heart and in appearance who works on this ship called the Indomitable. And it's during a time in British history when they recently had to, the British Navy had to deal with a mutiny on another ship. So tensions were a little high. And on this one particular ship where this young man named Billy Budd, everybody liked him very much, but you'll always find one person who's got a chip on their shoulder who likes to give a good person a bad time. And there's no logical reason for it. And this is exactly what happened with Billy Budd, which led to him being accused falsely by one of the upper class shipmen. And then the story rolls out from there. And what I find interesting about Melville's writing, he is very wordy, but I believe this was in a time when authors were paid by the word. So that would explain it if that's the case with Melville. But also the way Melville goes over the thoughts and the considerations and the conversations, so you really get to see what's going on in people's minds. You really get to a good idea of what made a certain situation so difficult, why a particular person was faced with a decision, or why they made the decision that they did. So he showed you with some explanation. It almost sounds like a contradiction. He explained by showing and vice versa. But Melville really takes the time to cover that. I'll probably be more ready after this now to read Moby Dick, which is much, much longer than this book. But now that I've sort of gotten my feet wet with Melville's prose, perhaps it will make the bigger novel, Moby Dick, easier for me to read. So we'll see. I'll let you know as that time goes along. So there's my green dot. Next one. I did finish Dante's Inferno, and I read the Anthony Esolen translation. I chose it over the original one that I had started, which was the translation by Robin Kirkpatrick. And this was from the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. It's a beautiful book, but I preferred the one by Anthony Esolen. And I started over again. I don't know how far into the cantos I was, maybe the first 10 or 11. And then I switched to the Esolen and started from Canto 1 and read all the way through. The difference between these two is that besides the translation, Kirkpatrick only provides a brief introduction for each canto in the back of the book in the notes, and it's simply stating what's going to be included in that canto. That's it. Whereas Anthony Esolen is coming from a Catholic philosophic viewpoint. So his take on it is presented in the introduction to each one of the cantos in the back of the book in the notes. First, before I read an example of that, I want to go over Anthony Esolen discusses in his introduction. I read the introduction first, then I read the cantos, then I read the comments before each one, for the beginning of each canto in the notes section. Then I went back and I read the introduction again. I wanted to do that to get more insight into the information that was given at first in the introduction, and it really does make a difference when you do that. Esalen presents Dante as coming from a position of having three rules or principles, and it's these principles that guided him as he was putting together his poem. And I'm trying to find, here it is. So those three principles are: things have an end, things have meaning, and things are connected. And each one of these principles sort of builds upon the other. So it's cumulative and it's connected. The first one he expands on: things have an end. Aristotle, a biologist by hobby, saw that all living things strive towards some finished state, some perfection of their inherent structure. He says, just as the sapling, like an oak tree, does not grow so that it may use water, but uses water so that it may grow, so man's end must be what man seeks for its own sake and not for the sake of something else. The happiness of man must consist in the fulfillment of what makes him man, in particular his reason, which distinguishes him from all other living things. The second, that's still the first principle. This line of reasoning that I just read to you, applied to human behavior, is called natural law. Let me read that again more smoothly. This line of reasoning applied to human behavior is called the natural law, a term some of you may have heard before. If things are created by God, they must possess ends, goals towards which they strive, as it were, even if the goal is that of inert matter, merely to subsist or to fall. To violate the end or goal of a thing is to act against the structure of its being. It is to violate beauty, and as Dante would argue, to dishonor the creator of that beauty. Hence, sin involves an absurdity, a corruption of what should make lovely sense, and it is an affront against the wise creator. So this gives a better perspective on where Dante is coming from and how he designs those various punishments in hell, why he does it. The second principle is things have meaning. And he says, it follows from the first: the same creator who makes things beautiful as they are may endow them with a beauty not properly their own, either by allowing them to point toward things beyond themselves or by allowing them a special role in the unfolding story of the universe. He gives the example of Virgil's Aeneid, where our hero, Aeneas, it's hard to pronounce his name, Aeneas, in his fleeing from Troy as it was burning and bringing his family with him, and the experiences that he went through, and finally establishing his own town, his own kingdom, actually does something he could not have perceived at the time, which was the founding of Rome down the line. And Rome became this great power. And after Rome fell, what came from that? The church. So something Aeneas could not have even imagined. He played a role in bringing that about. So that's what's meant by that. And then the third principle, oh no, there's one more point I want to make on this. In his providence, God has allowed human beings free will. And the use of one man's free will at one moment can mean life or death for a city, or salvation or damnation for himself, and even ultimately for countless others. Then again, that expands a little bit more on Aeneas' role in founding Rome and what Rome would become, and then what the church would become. Going back now down to the third principle, which things are connected, this last principle follows from the other two. In that beautiful universe created by God, each thing has an end and a significance. Therefore, each thing reflects the mind and plan of its architect. And since the architect has created a world unfolding in time, each thing assumes its place in that unfolding. It is not possible to separate in this universe those things which have to do with divinity from those things which do not. So, just painting that picture for you, giving you that context, this is where Dante was coming from because he had that Catholic mindset. And it really does give you a depth as you're reading through each canto when you have that information. The introduction that I want to go over, I'm going to go for Canto 11, that Esselin provides the comment. Rather than just saying, this is what's going to happen, his notes or his introduction for Canto 11 is the following. Will there be organization in hell? It could not be hell without it. The logic is inexorable. Hell was created by God, and all things created by God are good. Therefore, hell is good. And since it was made by the supreme artist, it must possess its appropriate order, the order of justice. What that order is, Virgil explains at length, revealing what must strike the first-time reader as a surprising variety of sinners below, all categorized and subcategorized as if in a medieval compendium of evil. So far, we have followed roughly the 7 deadly sins on our way down into hell: lust, gluttony, avarice, wrath, and as I interpret the sullen of Canto 8, sloth. Now, when it is time to touch upon the great spiritual sins of envy and pride, Dante turns rather to bestiality and malice in all their ramifying abjectness. Of course, envy and pride, and wrath too, are the seeds of these most wicked sins, as Dante will show. Thus, one categorizing of sins is embedded within the other, and within each category of sin, there is ordering too, for neither God nor Dante is the author of confusion. It's the perspective he gives you. It made a lot more sense to me instead of saying, well, this was Dante's idea and I'll just make 7. And of course, we heard about the significance of the 33 cantos in each one, with the exception of the Inferno. This kind of gives you an understanding, a better understanding of where Dante was coming from when he was writing his story about the different levels of hell, and how he illustrated the punishments of each one of those sins in an orderly fashion. So there's that. I also want to point out that Esselin includes excerpts of some of Dante's other writings. He also includes, it was not part of the scriptural canon, but it was a spiritual writing known as the Vision of Paul, and it was listed, it had a Latin name to it. And someone had, there is a, I think it's in 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul talks about an NDE experience he had, a near-death experience after he'd been stoned and left for dead. And someone picked up on that later on and wrote what Paul could have seen when he was on the other side in the spirit world. If you read that excerpt at the back of this book, you're going to start seeing a lot of Dante's Inferno with those different punishments. It really was an eye-opener for me. So I think this is a fabulous translation and explanation. It really is more instructive. It fills those gaps that I think a lot of people might have in reading Dante's Inferno. So these are the 2 that I finished. And the one that I'm still working on is this. Let me take off my sticker. The University in Medieval Life. I had put it aside because I wanted to finish the Inferno. And I think that's it. And I'm going through that. And then I'll be starting Mansfield Park for Jane Austen July. And I can get that through that fairly quickly. I've read it a few times already, so I'm going to enjoy that reread. That's it, everybody. Good night, everyone. Thank you for spending time with me. I love you all, and hopefully I will see you again in just a few days. Bye-bye.